Yo, what's going on everybody? I hope this video finds you well, and today we're going to be looking at what I consider to be the 4 fundamentals of full stack development, at least modern full stack development. And I have this little grid already to kind of show what I think those 4 fundamentals are, but the most obvious one is, or has always been, the front end and the UI UX experience. So as a full stack developer, you need to know how to build front ends, UIs, like good user experiences. And with AI, this has never been easier. In my experience, like I've never been a good designer, but with these new models coming out that can just with one prompt build UIs, it has never been easier for me at least. And second, that has kind of always been there since full stack development is backend. So this includes, building APIs, interacting with database, and I would consider other stuff that lie in here like server components and more Next.js specific stuff related to full stack development. And then more recently came this like cloud section. So basically hosting, maybe tracking with Sentry or Posthog. These are just libraries which I'm all going to show in this video that help do these kind of things. But this has become another part of full stack development. How do you actually host your application? How do you make it available? How do you make it scalable? All these things. And I think most recently, what a lot of employers are actually going to be looking for is interacting with AI. So most applications, or at least newer applications, are going to have some kind of feature using AI. And that's either like what Notion has, where you press the space bar and you can interact with AI. It can also be like some more modern systems where you can actually interact with the UI with a prompt. Whatever it is, you want to show employers that you also know how to call maybe the simplest API endpoints that OpenAI provides. And in this video, what I'm actually going to do is recreate this app that I have already built using Svelte. So this is an app I built a while ago that has a login. So here you can sign in with Google. And then you can actually create words. So for in a different language, so for example, perigoso was dangerous in Portuguese. And then in another section, you could just learn those words. And I'm going to do a bunch of things to this application, which I built 1 year ago, and show you how you can build the fastest way possible using the libraries and frameworks that I have found to be the most efficient in the last 2 years. So we're going to use Shadcn. Just that's a no-brainer. It's the biggest and easiest component library to use with Next.js and React projects. So this is going to give us like 30 or 40 free components that we can immediately import into our project. So here's a carousel component, for example. And then we're going to use Tweakcn, another front-end UI library that we can just basically tweak our Shadcn components with, so that they don't look the same as all these other websites that have been coming out. So you can find here a bunch of different like presets, and one I usually like is, I think, Solar Dusk. Yeah, this one. So I think I'm just going to use this one in the project, and now I have, again, 30 components from Shadcn that are all going to be styled using Tweakcn. Then for the auth, we're going to use lucia-auth. It's not even a framework or a library. It's basically just a philosophy on how you should build authentication. So it gives you a pretty good system, or a pretty good like guidebook on how you can build actual authentication in your applications. And even though it might look like complicated code, you don't even really have to know what it means. You can just copy it and paste it into your project, and then you'll have authentication working. So that's what we're going to use for authentication. Then we're going to actually use Neon, which is going to be serverless Postgres. So if you don't know what that means, it's basically a database that you can just have whenever you actually need it. So whenever you make a request, that database is just going to spin up, and you can then access the data that you want to save. So for example, here I'm going to, again, log in, wrong account, log in with this account. And this is the easiest way where you can just create a database. You're going to get a URL, then you can import your database in your project. And now we have at least the building blocks ready. We know exactly what frameworks and libraries we're going to use to build our full stack applications. And now we can actually start cooking. We can actually start developing. And what I tend to do, or how I start, is I'm just going to let Claude actually build the UI and the UX. So I'm just going to write a prompt here of exactly what I want to build and tell it to build the UI and get inspiration from that. So I'm going to fast forward to while I write this prompt. All right, so now it's actually going to be, that's the nice thing with Claude. That's why I often use it for UI UX, is because it can actually run, not really run, but it can render the code it creates. So you can see here, it's already like creating some dummy data. So it's going to create some projects and just save those projects in like an array, I think. So that's kind of the nice thing. You can really just get, like, as someone who needs to see a UI in order to get some inspiration, it really helps. It's just going to build something, and you don't have to take it one for one. You can just take the parts you do like and ignore the parts you don't, and then you can reprompt it in order to fix some other things. And that's how I like to get, basically a first draft in. And while that is actually running, I can go to Next.js, take this, let's find the terminal, and let's run the command. So what this is going to do on a really high level is basically just create a Next.js project. So I'm going to create a Next.js project, and I'm going to call it new words, since I already have a project called words. TypeScript, yes. ESLint, yes, yes. Basically everything, we're just going to go default. And now it's installing. So while that's running, let's see what Claude has actually cooked up for us. So this is the basic UI it's made for us. We have a login button, cool. We have some kind of like text, create word cards, practice and learn. And then this is kind of like a landing page / login page. Basically, I think I'm only going to look at like these two components. I kind of like the way they look. The rest is a bit of nonsense. And I'm going to disable that while the user is not logged in. So I press login, and then it sees, I guess it's like a dummy. So Alex learning, and now I can start learning. So here are the two projects, and I can create a new project here. Otherwise, I can go into here and add a word, a translation, and a difficulty. All right, cool. So you can kind of see like how already you get a lot of inspiration from this. I'm not going to copy it one for one, but like it's really, really useful just to, see how like the first idea or the first concept is going to be built. So that's cool. I'm now going to actually go into this. So what did I call it? New words. New words. I'm going to open it with cursor. That is another tip. Use cursor while it's cheap. We're not sure how long it's going to last for. Okay, GPT-5 is also out. All right, I actually haven't used GPT-5 on cursor yet since I just came back from vacation. So that's going to be a cool like bonus step for this video. Like how good is GPT-5? But now we actually have a Next.js project, which is nice because if I run npm install, then it's going to install all the packages, and I can run npm run dev, and then on localhost 3000, I have a full stack application running. So as you can see, this is like the basic setup that you get when you have a Next.js application. So with Next.js, one click, you just accept all the defaults and you have an application running, and you can start making changes. So I'm actually going to come in here and remove all of the boilerplate, and I'm just going to put a div that says new project. And we're not going to import that. And now you can see that the only thing we see is new project. So that's how simple it is. Again, in this video, I'm not going to be explaining like how Next.js or any of these frameworks or libraries work. I just want to make you aware of their existence and how you can use them to make creating full stack applications much faster. So now I have this Next.js project, and I'm actually going to go to Shadcn. And on the Shadcn page, I'm just going to pick a framework with Next.js, and I'm going to init. So again, I'm keeping this high level. You can follow the tutorials as well. The point is that you know that they exist. And I'm just going to, again, pick all the defaults. So now it's working its magic. And now you can start adding components. So let's say I add the button component. So now I have this button component from Shadcn, and the reason why that's cool is because I can come in here and say button, import it, and click me. All right, so I'm not gonna lie, I actually started recording this video and going through all of it without realizing that I'm on the wrong profile. So actually on Cursor, you can select like different profiles, and I like to use this one when I'm making YouTube videos because then you guys can actually see what's going on. Basically what I was showing is, now that I added this button, it comes in like with the default Shadcn styling. We're actually gonna look at what kind of components we need from the old project that I created. So you can see like these are the two card components. Here is a select component. And if we go back, I think we also have just an input component. So we definitely need those Shadcn components for this project. So what I did is basically just use the command, and I added select, input, and label. So that's what I did. I ran that, and that just added these components straight into the components directory, which is super nice because then we can just use them. And the nice thing is now I can just show you what that looks like. If I just do card, a card header, card title, let's give it a card description, and then some card content. And just to make it maybe like a little bit, yes, okay, let's just add like some kind of basic icon in here so we can see what's going on. Okay, that's nice. Now I'm gonna actually add the input component. It can import the input component, nice. Now let's add the label component. Here we go, label, boom, 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 nice. And we can also add the select component as it's suggesting. So select, and now you can see the usefulness of the auto completion of Cursor. I basically, for basic things, I don't need to do anything. I can just tab through and it's gonna start importing the right things. And now what we're gonna see is some basic components that we just got by importing from Shadcn. And what I'm actually gonna do is make this like a little bit more visible. So now you can see, let me also add a max width and center it, why not? So now you can kind of see like the different components. We got a button, we got a card, we got an input, a label, which we could connect to a select, and so on. And we all got that like basically super quickly. And now what we're gonna do to take it one step further is go to Tweakcn. Now here you can play around, choose your own template. I always like the Solar Dusk one. We can come in here, once you select your template, it's gonna change the primary colors, the secondary color, the accent color, all kinds of things, the card, the shadows. And you can come in, you can take this, press this code button, and just copy all of this. This is basically the modifications to the default Shadcn styling. And here now you're going to remove everything from theme, inline, root, and .dark. The rest you should keep because that is still needed in order to make Tailwind work. Now we save that, and if you go back to the website, yep, this one, you can already see we have like some different styling. We got like this nice button color. We have like a different border. The shadow is different. Like there's some basic stuff, like the accent color is different, so that your website doesn't look like this. If you use the default styling, this is what your website will look like. It always looks like this, basically. All right, so now we have that. And one thing I like to do from this point on is actually go to Shadcn and quickly look at theming. So, or dark mode, I guess. Quickly go to nextjs. Here we can install the next themes, wrong tab. So let's just quickly do that and follow this guide. We can create a theme provider. So we go to components and we're going to create a theme provider.tsx and just copy the code. Let's get rid of that. Nice. And then it says to wrap your root layout. So I like to come in and just go to the root layout. And what did it say? Yeah, import this. So again, going over this really quickly because it's not really like the point of the video, but I can just show you how easily like you can get things working using these things. So I just copy this and then I make sure to wrap my theme provider with children and then we create a new component, which is going to be like this toggle. Let's see, let's go in here. Let's call it toggle.tsx. Copy that in. So now we need a drop-down menu. So again, we can just go add here, drop-down, I guess it's called. Because you can just know that these components are using Shadcn because the docs comes from Shadcn. So now look at how easy that is. I just add the drop-down menu and it becomes a component. I have all the code. I can make any changes I want. I can save that, and now I have a toggle component. The nice thing about that is I can pop in here, I guess it's called mode toggle. Yep. And now if I go back to the project, I have this little button and I can go between light mode and dark mode. Okay, super easy. That's out of the way. Now already your project has light, dark mode, or just system. But what is the next step? So now we have a bunch of components. Okay, dark and light mode. Let's actually go back to our Claude example and, you know, let AI build this, because this is simple enough. You shouldn't, in my opinion, be wasting your time building these components unless you're trying to learn. If you know how to use them, just go in and get the job done, in a sense. Like, let's take a photo of this. That's what I like to do. I like to take a photo of this. Again, let's take a photo of this. Boom, that's nice. Like that. So now I have 3 photos, and I think, so I actually need to copy and copy. And now I can actually just come in here using GPT-5. Let's post that image and the other image and the last image. So I just skipped through actually writing the prompt, since anybody can do that, and I just let it cook for a bit. And what we got in the end is, with a single prompt, just these 2 card components. And as you can see, they look nicely styled because of the Tweakcn. And yeah, I mean, it works pretty decently. We have the new project, and in the project here, like right now, there's no login, so we need to fix that. But in the projects, you have your Spanish, and you can add the new word, the translation, difficulty, basically just like in the Claude interface. And here you can, this seems to just, yeah, go to the same tab actually. So we need to work on that. But the next thing we need to do is set up our database. So if we go to, what I'm going to use is Drizzle. And all Drizzle is an alternative to writing standard SQL statements. So SQL is the way you interact with your database. And Drizzle is a JavaScript/TypeScript framework that lets you write queries in that language, and then they translate it to SQL. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick Neon. So you can just follow this guide to get started with Drizzle and Neon, but you basically need to make a Neon account. And so here I'm going to log in, and I'm actually going to create a new project. I'm going to give it words new. Let's just choose Frankfurt and let's create it. So just here in the project dashboard, you can actually have like connect to your database. And here is your connection string. So you can just copy the snippet, and then I have now a URL to my database. So that's kind of how easy it is. Like literally just with one click, I create a database for free in Postgres. And what I can now do is follow the Drizzle ORM guide. So it has a basic file structure. And here I'm just going to actually take these commands and run them. So here, as like they said, I'm going to install the packages that they require in the .env file. So here's where, do I already have a .env file? No, okay. So in the root of the application, just create a .env file. And then here set, as it says, your database URL to, and this part I'll cut out because I might actually want to use this. So here we go. So that's all I did, right? I just found the database URL in the dashboard and set it up in a .env file. And now you can actually create an indexed file in the source directory. So what does it say here? Source and then index. Index.ts. And in here, I'm going to copy this. And now, yeah, okay. So I think that's because I just do that to remove the error. But basically, this could be undefined because the .env file, like you don't know that it has this variable, and that's why it's doing this. So I'm just going to remove the error by doing this, which basically says, if it doesn't exist, just make it the empty string, but that will never happen since it does exist. create a table. So create a schema.ts file. So first we're going to come in here and we're going to create a new folder called db. And here we're going to create a schema.typescript. Nice. And first thing we need is creating a table. So we're not actually going to create this table yet because, well, we're going to have a separate users table. So let's not create users now and then later change them. And then here we're going to have a drizzle.config file. So where did we have to keep that? So that's just in the root. So you come in here and it's called drizzle.config.ts and you just paste all of that in. And I think we actually have now applying changes. Okay, so once we'll get into this later. But basically we could already connect to the database now. Like that's how easy it is. We have a database for free, it's running, and it can actually hold a lot of data for free. So that's database is set up, and I'm going to actually show in a bit, like we're going to create a table and actually set up authentication and stuff like that. All right, but now that we actually have our database set up, it's time to create some tables that we're going to use for authentication. And for this, we're going to use Lucia. And that is a philosophy on how you should build authentication in your web applications, basically. And you can just follow like because this takes a bit longer. Like you need to actually read all of this and copy and paste all this code. But like this is something you definitely need to learn as a junior developer. So I would really recommend doing this a couple times in different projects. But you can just follow this basic implementation. And if you're not interested, you can literally just copy the code and follow the tutorial on frameworks. And that's going to give you authentication in your Next.js project. All right, so I basically just finished up writing the authentication for the project by following the Lucia guide. And to quickly go over what it did, the most important things is we have two tables. We have one which is the users. It's going to have an ID, a username, a password hash, and a created at. So 4 columns of the table. And it's going to have a sessions table as well. So our database now is going to have 2 tables, and I'm going to run those commands to actually create the tables in the Neon, so you can see how easy that is. So yeah, it's a lot of code, but again, it's all comes from like the framework, so you don't have to feel overwhelmed by it. The session has an ID, it connects to a user ID, and has an expires at and a created at. So what's basically happening is users are connected to sessions so that when a user logs in, they don't have to re-log in every time. We can store their session and make sure that within a specific time, they can just always log in using that token. So that's what it did in the schema. And then it created an authentication file, which is basically, I have a function to hash passwords. So here, when you don't store the normal user's password, you store a hash of it. So if you have your password as like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, it's going to hash it into like a random string of 64 digits. And then you have another function that's going to verify the password, which basically does the inverse of this hash. And we have a couple of helper functions, which let us create users. So here we have create user, and then we use Drizzle to actually create users. And a bunch of other stuff. I'm not going to go over it all, but the important thing is now in Drizzle. So what I'm going to do is just actually run this command. And what it does is it's no schema file found for path.slorge. If path represents a file, please make sure. Okay, so we need to actually come in Drizzle and we need to change the schema path. Okay, then it's in /app. Yeah, okay. So make sure you change the schema like path to this path, and that's going to actually look down in app. Then it's going to look in DB and find the schema file. And what it does is it actually applies the changes that we wrote in this code. So now we can actually see if we go back to Neon, this one, we can go to our tables, and we have 2 new tables. We have the session table and the user table. Right now there's no data in them, but at least you can see that it was created. So now if we actually test this out and we go to the sign up page, we should have here sign up, and let's try it out. Let's try username, KeyLang as always, and password. Or actually, why don't we just suggest password, use a strong password, and we create the account. All right, so perfect. Now we actually have authentication set up. We can log out the user. Okay, right now it's going to a weird route, but we can easily fix that. And we can always log back in. It's going to remember the password. And here's the user. So what I'm actually going to do now is kind of skip through, because this is going to take some time, but I'm basically going to get rid of this mock data. And in our schema file, I'm going to make some new tables. So I'm going to make some project tables. I'm going to make a new table to save the actual words so we can start adding them and saving them to the database and stuff like that. And that's all going to be in order to show you an AI feature that I'm going to build around this app so we can get that final kind of quadrant out of the grid there, that final one, which is showing your employers that you know how to use AI. All right, so I'm back, and it took me about, let's say, an hour to code up everything you're just about to see. And that goes again to show like the power of using this tech stack basically. So I removed all the mock data, and there's now a dialog where you can just add what kind of project you want. So maybe I want a Dutch project as well. Create, then I'm going to use, again, I've made tons of videos about this. I'm not going to cover it now, but I'm basically using like nextjs server actions to dynamically revalidate the data in the database to just automatically add this project when you create a new one. So let's stick to the Portuguese one. When you actually click on a project, you can see the words you've added to the project, and you can also add new words in this dialog, and you can start learning on the right side. So what I'm actually going to do first is see what were the words that I added last time. So, okay, we have safe and seguro. So let's add that one. Safe and seguro. Like that. Now we can add the word. It's automatically going to be entered there. And let's do one. Bring and trazer. So bring and trazer. Nice. Let's add that word. And then the part we're going to get into, which is actually using AI. So before you do the learning session, you can basically select what difficulty you want. Let's do easy because I'm like very rusty. And I'm going to click on start learning. And what's actually happening now is I'm making a request to OpenAI using the words of that project to generate some kind of random sentence that I have to translate. So in this case, the sentence that OpenAI generated was, please bring your passport to the airport. So I think that's, what is it? Por favor, bring. Okay, it's trazer, but because it's like a order, you have to spell it differently. So let's say trazer seu passaporte ao. I'm very, very rusty, so I have no idea if this is correct, but let's just submit the answer. And again, what's going to happen is the answer is going to be submitted to OpenAI in order to be graded. So I'm making 2 API requests, which I'm going to get into on how to do that. But here's the result. OpenAI basically says the meaning is somewhat preserved, but there are significant areas in the vocabulary and grammar. Remember to use traga, yeah. So in Portuguese, kind of side topic, but like if you given an order like please bring, then it's like a different verb conjugation. So I didn't really remember that because it's been a while. But remember to use traga for bring and aeroporto for airport. Keep practicing. So yeah, you can get a new exercise. If I want to, then please bring your textbook to class tomorrow, and so on. You also get a grade out of 100. So let's see how this actually worked. And by the way, again, just less than an hour. A lot of bugs, of course, as you saw, like the UI is not perfect and it's like not that intuitive. But yeah, it kind of gets the job done. So how do we actually make this OpenAI request? And I'm going to focus mainly on like using OpenAI in code and not so much like how I just built all of that UI, since I've covered that in many different videos. But basically what I do is I just get the words of the project from the database and I verify that the user has some words. Once I have that, I'm actually duplicating the request. So I could just pass those words into this generate new sentence function, but instead I pass the ID of the project and I fetch the words again. So like I don't need to do that, but like I said, I coded it pretty quickly. So in this function, generate new sentence, I get the words of the project. Then I get 3 random words from this like list of words. Right now I only have 3, so it's not very random. But let's say the user had a bunch of many more words. You'd basically get random words, shuffle them, and what happens then is I pass those words and the difficulty level in order to this function called generate sentence. And based on that, I'm actually now going to create the prompt, basically like you would do in, like you would just as if you were typing here, except now you're just creating it in like your editor. So you're literally saying like, okay, if the user selected easy, then this is going to be the context and so on. And now I'm telling like, here's the prompt. You are a language learning assistant. And then I add one of these in based on the difficulty. Here are the available words. And then I give it the available words based on the database. I give it some requirements. And this is just basically like one long string, one long text that you could imagine that you're submitting into like here, you know? And then here I actually make the OpenAI request. So I have an OpenAI, like you can download it with NPM, and you can actually get an OpenAI client, and you just use this new keyword to kind of spawn like an OpenAI instance, and you get an OpenAI API key. And with that, you're like good to go to make requests. Basically, it's that easy. And then here I can just, like, they have this whole API docs, but I'm going to use this one to actually ask OpenAI to create a sentence using the prompt that I created. So I give it like a max tokens. Temperature kind of like ensures the randomness. So the higher the temperature, the more random the output's going to be. And the lower the temperature, the less random it's going to be. So that's how I kind of create the prompt and make an API request to OpenAI for the creation of the sentence. And to actually grade the sentence, basically the same thing. So I need the score, the feedback, and is correct. So again, prompt, you are a grading language translation exercise. Here was the original sentence, and here was the user translation. And these were the words in order to, like, here was the vocabulary of that sentence. And then I have to, like, OpenAI has to grade the translation on a scale of 1 or 0 to 100. Again, you get the idea. Basically just building the prompt in the IDE, then making an OpenAI request. And then because now I actually need to parse JSON, right? Because like in the front end, I want to show, let's quickly do this again. If I submit the answer, like we need to get some results back from OpenAI and actually render them in the front end. So I ask OpenAI to just return JSON format. And when it returns JSON format, what you need to do is wrap that in like a try catch, because there it's still a probabilistic model, so there's a chance that it's not going to return JSON. And if you use cheap models, I would say that chance is pretty big. So here I'm actually going to parse the message to make sure that it did send the result as JSON. Otherwise, in the front end, if you try to access it, it's going to be undefined and you're going to get an error, and it's going to be an unpleasant user experience. So before that happens, just wrap it in a try catch. If it's all good, then return that data to the front end and display it. And now you have, basically an app that's running from front end. The UI is looking good. It's very easy to add components. Like never build your own components, basically, like as in UI components. Just Shadcn has all of them. The styling's looking nice. We touched on some backend as well, some APIs, and we actually built a request to OpenAI. And now the last thing I would do here is actually turn this into a GitHub repo. And once you have a GitHub repo, you can actually log into Vercel. So make an account using Vercel, follow this add new project, and here you can actually just import your repository from GitHub itself. And it's literally going to build and do all of that and give you a link much like this one. So that was the final thing, touching on also hosting so that people can actually see what you've built. And the purpose of this is that you can now have a link which you can share with people like employers. And it's especially useful if you're coming out of university and you don't really have any like experience yet, but you still want to show that you're motivated and that you've like worked with these tools before. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is definitely my longest video so far, and it took me quite some time to make it. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.